So my last historical perspective before your lunch, we have to go back further than 2013, is to 1985, when I met my first patient with Tourette Syndrome. Tourette Syndrome is a condition that affects children and adults. It can be incredibly disabling. At that time, I was working at the National Hospital for Nervous Diseases in Queen Square in North London. And one of my jobs was a patient with Tourette Syndrome had been on treatment, and to check whether it was working, I had to escort them out to McDonald's for the evening to have a meal and see how they got on. So I'm going to ask Bradley Hamper to come up on stage from GS1 UK and talk about the Tourette's charity. Bradley, thank you very much.
My name is Bradley Hamper. I'm a GS1 UK partner manager. And I've been given the privilege of introducing not just our official charity partner, but a charity that is very, very close to my heart. Reason being, my son has actually been living with Tourette Syndrome since he was 3 years old. And I can honestly say, without the amazing support from this charity, I can't imagine just how harder it would have been for him. And I can't thank them enough, really, for that support. So, conscious of time, so without any further delay, I'd like to welcome to the stage Tourettes Action.
Hi everyone, thank you very much, Bradley, for the introduction, and thanks to GS1 for both picking us as your charity partner, but also for letting us take a little bit more of your time today. We have the unenviable task of standing in between you and lunch, so we're only going to be very brief, a bit of a 10-minute whistle-stop tour of Tourette Syndrome, and then a little bit about what we do as a charity. Just to introduce ourselves, so I'm Ed Palmer. I'm a psychiatrist and researcher at the University of Birmingham. I'm the vice chair of trustees for Tourettes Action, and I have Tourette Syndrome, and this...
Hi, I'm Ione. I'm an occupational therapist, and I work as the therapies and advocacy manager at Tourettes Action. I do lots of their training and their awareness sessions to anyone and everyone who will listen to me, so we're very pleased to be invited today, and I have Tourette's. So we will get started. They shouldn't really give me a clicker, so we'll see how we go with this. So today we're going to give you a total whistle-stop tour of tics and Tourette's and some of the things that come alongside it, some of the challenges faced in current healthcare situations. We're going to do some myth-busting. We're going to look at what support we can offer as a charity. And then if there's time, we'll open up to questions. And if not, we'll encourage you to come and see us at our very bright lime green stand in the corner.
So what is Tourette Syndrome? Tourette Syndrome is an inherited neurodevelopmental condition. And the key symptom of Tourette's is something that we call tics. And tics are involuntary movements or sounds that the person will produce. And to be diagnosed with Tourette Syndrome, you need to have a mixture of motor tics, vocal tics, for more than 12 months. Next slide, please, Amy. So motor tics are tics that involve movement or muscles. So you can have simple ones like movements in your face or your eyes, or much more complex ones, so touching things, jumping, turning around, doing things in very complex, coordinated order. Vocal tics are tics that produce a sound. So again, they can be simple things like whistling or coughing or clearing your throat, all the way through to whole words or phrases, animal sounds, things like that.
So there are lots of different factors which impact and influence tics. So Ed and I both have Tourette's, and our tics are incredibly different, and it will be the same for anyone you meet with this condition. And symptoms range from incredibly mild, hard to spot, if we think about some of the examples on the motor tic slides, blinking, little movements, to incredibly complex, large, full body movements, words, phrases, things that stop people sort of safely and independently mobilizing or completing activities of daily living, or working, looking after themselves. So there's a really, really broad spectrum of severity and presentations, and there's lots and lots of things that impact that, from day-to-day well-being, to hormones, to age, to stress, to joy and excitement, all of these just human emotions and experiences. We also know that Tourette's loves company. So around 90% of people with Tourette's will have a co-occurring condition alongside their Tourette's, or something that happens as a result of their Tourette syndrome. So some examples that we've got on the slide. So over 50% of us have ADHD, and that falls into quite a cycle. We know that rates of anxiety and mood disorders are higher in our Tourette's community. We've got higher rates of co-occurring autism spectrum conditions, difficulties with sleep, sleep, emotional regulation, sensory processing differences, and pain. Pain is an experience in nearly 100% of people with Tourette's. And if I'm honest, it's the side that we don't see or think about so often. But it's a really real part of the diagnosis. And for lots of us, it's the things coming around the tics that can be just as challenging as the tics themselves. So just to wrap up that section, when you've met one person with Tourette's, you've met one person with Tourette's. And Tourette's is in green here. We should have the same philosophy and approach to any diagnosis or any characteristic or feature.
So a little bit about some of the current challenges facing the Tourette's community. The biggest one is really accessing a diagnosis and treatment. So for many conditions, there'll be established pathways, and ideally it would be that the patient recognizes that there's a change or a problem. They might visit their GP. The GP thinks this could be tics and Tourette's. They refer to a specialist service who can offer assessment, diagnosis, both of Tourette's, but also some of those co-occurring conditions, and then long-term treatment management and follow-up. Unfortunately, this isn't the case. In reality, people can get stuck in loops. So they go to their GP, but the GP doesn't recognize that it's tics and Tourette's. They think that it's a behavioral problem, or that the GP is trying to refer, and they get knocked back, so refer to CAMS or pediatrics, and no one will accept the referral. And most commonly, this leaves people without any support in the community. Often for a very long time. So we did a survey recently, and actually we found that over 50% of people were waiting more than a year to see a clinician for a diagnosis. And rather terrifyingly, 1 in 5 were waiting 3 years. And perhaps most disheartening was that more than half of people that finally sat in front of a clinician were told that they could be offered no ongoing support and were discharged in the same appointment. So yeah, this is Bradley. We're showing a little bit about his journey, but it's a journey that we hear with really most of our service users.
Absolutely. And so just to wrap up today, we're going to do a little bit of myth busting. So Tourette's is one of those wonderful conditions that I think there's probably more myths surrounding it than facts in our general population. And the number of people I meet who I say, I've got Tourette's, and they go, oh, what, the swearing condition? Or they come out with a really kind of big assumption. And we know that the myths that surround Tourette's cause lots of challenges for our community. They result in underdiagnosis. People aren't seeing their experiences represented in the media, on the TV screens, in medical services. There's no speciality areas. And so they're not able to spot their symptoms at an early stage. They're not able to find a community, find connection in other people, give a meaning to their experiences and the unique challenges that this condition can present. So we're trying as a charity to do some myth busting here. So the first myth that surrounds Tourette's, and we've kind of seen this myth historically in lots of other neurodevelopmental conditions, is that Tourette's only affects males. So the current statistics is that Tourette's is 4 times more common in males than females, but we know that there are lots and lots of factors that influence this. We're going to probably see these statistics change as we update the research, and we're starting to learn that potentially the trajectory of tics just looks different between genders, and so we need to get a bit more curious before we make this assumption.
Again, I only referred to this, but the idea that everyone with Tourette's will swear. So the technical word for this is coprolalia, and that's swearing, but you're going to get people that will do the movement thing, so putting up their middle finger. I'm probably the only person that's allowed to do that on this stage, actually. But actually, it's not as common as people think. So about 15 to 20% of people with tics and Tourette's will have swearing tics. And I think sometimes it can be a barrier to diagnosis, so people thinking that unless you swear, you're not going to have a diagnosis of Tourette's.
Absolutely. Another myth surrounding Tourette's, and again, this has become a barrier to diagnosis for some, is this idea that you'll grow out of it. So Tourette's is neurodevelopmental, so it starts in childhood. And for some people, for a large proportion of individuals with Tourette's, their tics might reduce into adulthood, or kind of for some people disappear completely. But for lots and lots of people, their tics will not disappear. They may change, they may reduce in frequency, but they will stick around. And during periods of stress and transition and life change, those tics are likely to reoccur again. So this idea that Tourette's is a childhood condition and you'll grow out of it kind of does everyone a disservice, because we're hardcore evidence that that is not always the case. So another myth is that we should only focus on the ticks we can see. So actually, we were talking to Bradley earlier, and this is a really common phenomena that children go to school and teachers say, oh, we don't see them tick there, but at home they're ticking lots. And that's the assumption that we can see all ticks. But actually, there's loads of ticks that can happen inside of the body, scrunching of the toes, clenching of the stomach muscles, counting kind of items and objects in your environment. And so if we're only accommodating and accepting for these really loud and visible ticks, then we're doing our Tourette's kind of community a disservice.
So Tourette's is funny. I think this exists for lots of different conditions. It can be, me and Ione will often laugh about things that have happened. And we were hosting an event recently, and the fact that I look increasingly like Harry Potter getting old hasn't escaped me and doesn't escape the notice of others either. So I was on stage giving a talk and was just getting these Tourette's heckles. So Harry Potter, Boy Who Lives, Santa Die going around the room. So it can be funny. Ticks can be great. But again, like so many things, it's to make sure that you're laughing alongside people and not at them.
Absolutely. And Tourette's is rare. This is a big myth and probably one of the most pervasive. People say to me all the time, I've never met someone with Tourette's before. And I think you probably have. It just hasn't looked like Pete from Big Brother or this incredibly extreme depiction of Tourette's and this condition. It impacts 1% of the population, 1 in 100 school-age children, and recent stats suggest that this could be as high as 1 in 50, and 300,000 people in the UK. So it's not rare. It's as common as autism and childhood epilepsy, but we do not have the same kind of public awareness and knowledge and support systems.
Great, that it's behavioral condition, so we know this isn't true. It's a neurological condition. Some of the symptoms may manifest in ways that could be misunderstood as behavior or misbehaving. So standing up in class, walking around, swearing, but people have very limited control over their tics, so we know it's not behavioral.
And finally, tics are what the person is thinking. Thank goodness this isn't true, but we are genuinely and frequently held accountable. Do you really think that? No, but tics are influenced by conscious and subconscious information from our sensory environment, and tics often kind of are processed and come out at a much quicker rate than we can kind of consciously think about things. So sometimes I'll tic and then I'll have a little explore in my environment to see what actually influenced that tic. So as a charity, we have a variety of support services available for people living with tics and Tourette's. We run training for schools, for health boards, for employers, like we said, for anyone who will listen. We have lots of resources for young people and adults. We have online CPD accredited training that's free. We have ID cards. We provide grants to people. We do amazing residential Tic Fest events where people with tics and Tourette's come together, and it's absolutely beautiful chaos. And we kind of have newsletters, and we're kind of keeping up to date with the research and things. So if you're interested in learning more, do check out our website or get in touch with us and find us in the big corridor, and feel free to ask some questions and get involved with some of the activities that we've got on offer today. Thank you so much for giving us your time right before lunch.